It might just be that they were thinking I'm on vacation and that got confusing for them. So maybe they'll be in a little later, or maybe they'll catch up with us next week. But for this week, I said that we would cover details, things that I hope to cover today for the rubric, and it's going to be constantly changing. Since I was on vacation here, I've had pretty intermittent internet. That's hard to say 10 times fast. And I have been putting together your rubric, but without the internet, it's been hard because my programs don't run. So it's been hard to put a package together that I felt like you guys could imitate. So I'm hoping to go over as much of these things tonight as we can and use the video for you to complete your homework as opposed to me having PDFs that you can reference for your homework. And if not, then I definitely know that this is doable, the complete a digital walkthrough using Sketchup. So we're going to learn some new ways that we can use Sketchup for presentations. And I am going to expect a front view, a back exterior, a kitchen, living room, and master bedroom, all in this digital walkthrough. And this is a good thing if you ever plan to use SketchUp for quick client visits. It's very, in my opinion, easy to do. I think it's one of the easier things you're going to learn in SketchUp. It's obviously dependent on that you've already drawn your model, so it's past those steps. But this step, even if you didn't know how to draw in SketchUp, you could set up a presentation to present for a client. Say if you were at a firm and that was your job, was just to work with presentation materials. So it's a good thing to learn. I think it'll be really fun for the 108 students if you are going to use your SketchUp model for your elevations or your perspectives. It'll be interesting to use that to present in front of the class, more of a video style. Oh, well, there's nothing on my screen yet except for the rubric. Sorry, I'm just reading through it, so I'll turn it on. Thank you, Robin. And let's see. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything else in the chat. Okay. So, and thank you, Tan, as well. Here's the digital walkthrough. Here's the detailed drawings. I wanted to cover exporting again from SketchUp. Some people struggled with it. I was really kind this week as I was grading the homework. I didn't exactly even grade it. It seemed to be like the majority of people didn't get it straight on, although they thought it was. I was having trouble opening files on my side here, so I just wanted to walk through it again in this class and kind of have a do-over this week for that detail of the edge of the mantle, but I will send you grades probably on Sundays when I'm going to send out that updated mantle kind of with my notes on it. For this week, I more so graded your SketchUp homework because that's what I had access to. But we're going to talk about some other details, specifically the cabinetry detail, and if we get to it, the stair detail will be the last thing. So I've left some space for how much time we have tonight in saying drawings, to have leaders and circles, but no text or dimensions, because this would just be a lot of extra time, I think, especially bouncing back into AutoCAD from being in SketchUp and being a little bit rusty. So I will go ahead and begin looking at SketchUp and walking through our mantle detail one more time and where we were headed with it. When I come into SketchUp, originally I had said you want to just start putting things on different layers, and I have so many versions of this drawing at this point. But if you wanted to see this detail easier, you would want to come through and put these walls for the house on a different layer, or in our case, just for the mantle, you could even go ahead and turn them completely off because you're just trying to get to that side. So if you had kept your layers on, let's see what this one holds for me. Layer 0 in my case. It says that outer wall is, but I'm pretty sure I'm clicked into the group. The group as the whole is just on house. So I'm going to go ahead and come over to my default tray and left click on layers and turn the house layer off. That's one possibility. You could have already started to, and I did in another model, put them on north, south, east, and west, or right, left, whichever, front and back if you're trying to think of it as camera views in SketchUp. But coming through here again, and I know we ran through this one time, but it seemed to be still very confusing. I think the step that we're missing is you can have absolutely no orbiting after you get your view lined up. So for our view camera, I want to go into standard views, and I believe that this is front. Okay, I'm getting used to that now. I know the other side is left. So once I'm in front, first I pick a standard view, and then at that point, if I don't already have it on, I turn on parallel projection. If it was off, it might start me way zoomed out again. So let's pretend it was off, and I'm still kind of cattywampus. I'll come into my standard views and again pick front and find where I'm at in my drawing. It threw me under the deck, and then camera, parallel projection. Now you can zoom forward and backwards. You can pan with the hand, but you cannot orbit after you have chosen your standard view and parallel projection, because any type of orbiting, and it could be the slightest. I know some of you get used to resting your finger on that center clicker mouse button, and you'll just, you know, toss it off just a tiny bit, and then you went to export it and there's a tiny double line. It's because you did not pan, you grabbed your clicker, or when you were panning, you switched from panning to clicker, just got a little bit mouse happy, and were off slightly. So always make sure, and it could look very much straight on and still be off, make sure that you standard view, front, and my parallel projection is already on without clicking anything. I know right now, because in my camera parallel projections on and I just clicked straight to that view, it threw me in that exportable view. So I'm not going to move it all. I wanted to make sure I was fairly zoomed in. Some of you, I think why you end up changing your view is you're starting still too far zoomed out, and then you chose both of those camera views. You chose a standard view of front and then your parallel projection. But then because you were zoomed out, you thought, okay, I'll just zoom in, and amidst the zooming, you started to correct yourself, and it ended up not correcting yourself, instead throwing off your angle. So this is where I would come up to File, Export, 2D Graphic, and again, it's AutoCAD is selected for here. If it wasn't, I could come through and grab it. I know that AutoCAD is the .dwg file. There's also DXF file, but we're not dealing with that reference, only DWGs for this class for basic. So I'll reselect that, and then I will choose the proper folder. You always want to make sure, I know a lot of you when I'm working with you in lab hours are getting a little messy with your work, and it's hard to keep organized. You're either throwing it to your desktop or letting it kind of fall in the last place that your browser is showing up here. You want to make sure to, in my case, I'll go into Ivy Tech 2016, AutoCAD. I even divide my work, obviously, because I'm teaching by session, so it's easier for me to post that session. There is no 12. It almost overlaps with 11, so I just kept things in 11 this week. But let's say for the sake of it that that's where I'm sending the file. I come in here, and I want to also make sure, notice that it says Boathouse SketchUp model. It's going to default to the name of the drawing even when you're exporting just the mantle. So if I want to delineate that mantle name or text from an existing file, I could say mantle, or even just short it, mant detail, and I could say the date if I wanted to, if I planned on trying again later if this didn't work, or however you want to keep it. But do put it in a session folder or break it down. That way it's easier for you to reference when we go back to AutoCAD for our final project, the drawings that you're looking for. So I'll export it. It gives me AutoCAD export audit OK. If it had an error, it would say error or incomplete. And then I'll go out and look for that in my desktop, IV Tech, AutoCAD, session 11. And this is a trick most of us know by now, but sort by date modified if you are someone who's not very organized and you just did something. So Mant detail went right to the top. I'll double click it. Oh, this is my I have 2015. That's another thing I have to tell you for tonight. The school was unable to get me a license for 2014. I know it seems a little backwards as I'm a teacher, but they have to buy a complete license as opposed to you who are having a student version, and because it's such an old version, they don't support that license anymore. So even tonight I'll have to teach from 2017. This might cause a lot of questions, but I'm hoping for the most part, because of your experience with AutoCAD, it will make sense as far as tools that I'm using. So if I come into AutoCAD 2017 and open my file from there, it will let me. But as you can see, it says I need a license for even 2015 because they thought I could at least use that version. So hopefully I will have 2015 when I go back next week, but for now this might look even a little bit newer than that. Tools are similar place. So I'm going to go to Open, Drawing, and I'll back out of my Downloads, Desktop, IV Tech, AutoCAD, Session 11, Mantle Detail Drawing, and I'll open it from there. Continue opening drawing file. All right, so if you did it correctly, and it seems to be different for everyone depending how much of the view you're showing when you're in SketchUp. So if you're super zoomed in, the more zoomed in you are, the less geometry it's going to bring in with it, and it will focus on this detail. But some of you might have tons of extra lines. I want to emphasize, in talking during lab hours, some people have brought up, how are we using this? Is it that you would start drawing in SketchUp and then go into AutoCAD with a drawing? Or is it always better to start in AutoCAD and end up in SketchUp and just use SketchUp for 3Ds and perspectives? And I think at this point in my working more with SketchUp and going back and forth between the two, that it's fair for me to say always start drawing in AutoCAD for precision. So if you're going to draw a floor plan, there are people who professionally use SketchUp and they draw their entire floor plan from there. I can tell as a class right now, while there's some of you who are a little bit quicker at SketchUp than others, you all seem to struggle less with AutoCAD in a more concrete way than you do with SketchUp. It seems to trip you up a little bit more. Though it's more enjoyable, I still think the technical side of it could be difficult doing an entire group of plans. And for presentation purposes, this is great, but for the actual architectural detail or just basic lines, it's so much easier to use SketchUp for precision. AutoCAD for precision. So the order should always be, I draw my floor plan with lines in AutoCAD. Let me come into 2017 where I have my whole set of drawings. Okay, so we drew all of these drawings. Which of these could I just do in SketchUp? Which of them could I do in AutoCAD? I would always do my floor plan in AutoCAD and export it because it is going to be more precise and less lines. Looking at what I just imported from SketchUp into AutoCAD, because SketchUp is a polygonal drawing system, it ends up bringing in a bunch of unnecessary geometry, but also kind of a stunted line effect. So where I had one wall, I now have a ton of smaller segmented lines. AutoCAD, we could have drawn this as one solid line right away from the start, and it would have been no problem. Where I find it still useful is for the amount of detail like this, if you're a purely visual learner and you have this much detail and you're not creating it from scratch yourself, but instead would rather go to a library, search for crown molding details or mantle details, and get a conceptual idea of how you would like something to be shaped, or even pieces of this, and say, if I scale this in SketchUp to about, I know my fireplace is this deep, and then I just am missing the mantle top. I can look at other people's ideas and break them apart and piece them together until I have something close to what I want to design, export it into AutoCAD, and have that detail here and scale it up or make it smaller or delete pieces of it off. But I'm not coming up with ideas out of nothing. Now some of you are super creative and you might be able to come up with this much detail at once, or some of you might just like this idea and want to incorporate it into your home. But I think that coming up with these pieces, it helps you to view it as a section or as a side view in a way that you might not be able to visualize and then draw in AutoCAD yourself. So if you want to have the most precision, bringing it back in through here, if I was going to import an entire floor plan, and let me see if I do have that in my drawing 2017, a copy of the floor plan. No, I don't have the SketchUp one. But I can show you tonight what that would look like. And I'm not even concerned if we don't completely get to details tonight. I just want to cover some of these questions more so. So we have our nice, beautiful lines. You all know you drew them. A huge line here. Maybe this entire wall is a solid line. In my case, it is. And then I drew all my detail around it. But then when we go back into our SketchUp detail, you can see, as I said, it's pulling all of the pieces apart. Let me get back in here. Oh, did I lose it? Is it behind my view? All right, there we go. So every single piece, whether it was the wall or the curve, remember curves aren't true curves, so where we could have one arc or another single arc, we now have upwards of, you know, maybe 25, maybe 50 different pieces for an individual arc. But I'll show you how it is useful in doing a detail if you know that information. So it can be precise as long as you follow the steps that I recovered for importing it, making sure your camera is straight on in parallel projection. This is going to actually be the dimensions that we want it to be. And I have it dimensioned in my drawing in here. I have brought my details all together on the side, started to dimension it, so 1'3 inches is accurate size to what a mantle might truly be. And in here, I started to detail out how I am creating the section drawing. So something you need to know about SketchUp is sections are only as true as the model is built. So for instance, this is what my completed side view looks like after bringing it in. At first it started as just that empty shell that was imported from SketchUp, and maybe I'll even come through and drag that into the side for you so you can see that. If I come back over to this nasty drawing here and I copy it with my clipboard and then go back into my final drawing here, and I can clipboard paste. Alright, so these are two that I've done at completely separate times, and in here I've cleaned it up. So I still have all these disjointed pieces, but for my detail drawing, it doesn't concern me. What I'm concerned about is how this thing is built and what the overall dimension of this is. So the fact that this is disjointed will not hurt my drawing at all. I'm also not going to export this back out into SketchUp, so I don't need it to be a nice clean line that I could pull up to be a wall or use for measuring off of. What you can do is if you have 100 lines, you could either come through with what you have imported and draw a point to point. So in here where there's all these lines, I could either delete all of the extra internal pieces and go to Home and find your line tool and snap to the points, creating one solid line. And then this came in nicely as one line. I'm not concerned with two bigger lines, but all those pieces I want to clean up my drawing a little bit. It'll even bring in some weird geometry because I had art above this, so you have to pay attention to what's in your drawing. And I had something hanging out on the side of the wall. So if I want to bring it in as a solid line, I could either create my own line, or if I undo a jillion times, have all of these, we'll see how successful this is. So if I say join, or let me first select by using my selection window and going from the right to the left, and if I say join, enter, notice it created one line. Okay, so I'm going to undo that for you so we can think about that again, what's happening. So the join tool, I don't think that we've covered this ever, but it's a nifty tool to use when in situations like these where you have 100 lines and you know I brought in parallel projection. They're all on the same axis. They're all in a line perfectly. They just happen to be a bunch of pieces. So all I need to do is select all the pieces that I want to join. And even if I wanted to, I could select that in the upper part of the wall. And I type the word join. And it takes those pieces and it should create the line like it did with these nice ones. Oh, yep. So there is one line, and then it looks like there's some underneath as well. So if I move this to the side, yes, it is one line. It's interesting though that when I click on it, it's showing me all the individual pieces. So that might be something new with 2017. Don't get confused if yours doesn't look like that. When you click on it, it's just a solid line. I think that's just something brand new to the program. So remember, you can take all the pieces and select join. I don't believe that that is true of these. I cannot join these pieces that are in the arc because they're not on the same straight path. So we'll see. I'll type join. Hey, so that is new to me. I didn't know that. I thought they in fact had to be completely in a straight line. So it could be a very nice way to go through and clean this up easily if you don't want to go through and find the midpoint, draw your arc. But like I said, I'm not concerned so much about these round pieces as much as the straighter lines, which I'm using for measurements. So There we now have a cleaner outline. Here's the second step. For the second step, for the side view, what I want you to do is complete it as if you're looking at it in SketchUp in the pieces that are showing here with the shadows. So some of it's harder for you to see, so you're going to want to review the video and see how I broke it up and kind of learn to understand how it's being built, because that's what you would be telling the woodworker you're working with or the contractor. It really just depends, cabinetry shop, what you want or are thinking of its actual internal being built. This is just the basic side view, so this is the external, and then later we'll come down through and see how each of those pieces are created in the shapes. So for up here, I'm just drawing the lines of the individual pieces. So this is actually one piece of cove molding, a special C-shaped curve, and then this inside is made up of a bunch of pieces that I can't tell unless I do a section drawing, a cross section of that entire mantelpiece. And then I put my notes about the details that are going into it. So I have a couple of drawings that I was able to get uploaded from my work from school, and I'll show you what this drawing is trying to communicate. If I go into session, and I actually think this one was 10 because that's back when I was thinking about doing it. So we have a couple of drawings that you could use to get used to drawing a mantle and seeing how it's actually a bunch of individual pieces nailed together. Okay, so in this case for their mantle, which is not ours, they have the 1x12 plank, some crown molding, casing, a 3-inch pine board that they've done kind of a box cut around, and then another 3-inch pine board that they've wrapped around. So it's a bunch of little pieces made together. Sometimes the reality is more like this, that there's some cut crown molding that is actually going around some supporting nailing blocks in the center, and then they have smaller pieces of trim molding going beneath it and a thicker board on top. And then there's the leader board that's holding everything in place, and then some supports going through the center. So ours is very similar to that, and it's really I think where people get hung up on details is you're trying to work backwards from something that you're seeing the outside. If you're not, in fact, making it yourself, it's hard to conceptualize internally what's going on. And sometimes that'll mean making it up for your student projects. When you get out into the workforce, you'll have very clear instruction on how things are going to be made, and then you'll just be drawing the details from somebody else's dimensions and planning, or you'll be working directly with somebody in cabinetry that is going to walk you through each of these steps and say, would you like this thickness of a molding? How much trim do you want? How much cove do you want? What's the thickness of your board? So you won't have to necessarily know all these pieces, but it's good exercise to be thinking about how it is constructed. Through. Here's another one. So here's a decorative fireplace mantle and a section view. And here we see kind of a ledger board, which is holding it to the wall, and then maybe you could have some 3 1/4 inch board on the base, some type of cove molding that ends here, possibly another flat board, a nailer so that you can connect these 3 pieces together and then get them into the ledger, which you'll end up connecting to the wall. So this is the section view. This is one of the views we're doing, and then this is the side view, except we're doing just a cleaner side view that's showing what it would look like as if it was photographed from the side. We're not going to have any call-outs for our side view of our mantle. We're only going to have the call-outs for the section view. So by call-outs, I'm actually talking about leader lines, which you can use letters or numbers. It depends on how you have labeled your sections. Oftentimes, if you're doing a quick sketch or trying to communicate something fast, you'll just say top view, section view, side view. But when you're being more professional with a set of plans like we'll be doing with in this class, you'll end up using the notes, having the line that cuts through, saying what detail it is, the scale of your detail, and depending on how many plans you have, so for instance, we could have a set of drawings where we have 5 main pages, the first of which is our floor plan, the second of which is our reflected ceiling plan. So you'll want to say what page the plan is, and then also what number of detail the detail is within that plan. We would look for a little more specific detail like that. And it's very different depending on each project and each plan. So here's just more fireplace mantles, and it says they stock in red oak, hardwood to be painted as shown. They'll show you the outside, and here they show you the construction of how they're creating that with individual wood pieces coming together on the inside. So there's section views of those. This one's probably closest to what we're doing for our project. See if I can minimize this window a little bit and pull it off to the side. So here we too have a top, which is our 3 1/4 inch thick hardboard. And then we would have 2 1/4 inch full round molding. And there's actually router bits, so the molding parts are named after the bits that are routing them out. And it's just this piece right here. I think a lot of times it's hard for people, even in this view, to conceptualize what you're seeing because it's just black and white lines. You could hatch it. It's not super standard for us to hatch things just to see which pieces are separate from others. So for instance, when I talk about the full round molding, I'm simply talking about here, and then here I have a smaller full round molding. I'm not talking about this piece and this piece, but I know that for people who have a hard time separating lines and saying which pieces go together here, because in reality this is all one piece, this rectangle right here. But how would you know that if it's just a bunch of black and white lines? Well, in here we can see the only things they really show different, and you have to zoom in on their drawing, are that is indeed one piece, and I can tell because it's dashed behind. And so is the ledger. It goes all the way to the top behind and in between these nailer boards. So that's probably the most detail you'd get, although it's not against the law to go through and hatch these pieces if you wanted to. It's just that you usually only hatch materials if they're different from each other. So if these are all woods, they technically would end up being the same hatch. If you really needed it for installation purposes or for manufacturing, then you could go ahead, if they were having issues understanding you, and hatch them as just different patterns to separate the pieces. Okay, so for our homework, we're going to be drawing the guts of this and seeing how it's working out. So I actually do have another plan. I was in the middle of testing it within a student's drawing, so to see if it worked the same, since I do have a different dimensioning in mine. I had copied my details in and was playing with the sizing. If I come into my detail drawing, 8.5 by 11, I want you to create the drawing, finishing off these pieces with lines, and come in and label using your leader lines, and then a circle and a letter in text, which I'll end up giving you the size of the circle, the size of the text. I won't tell you, you can tell by this visual, and hopefully if I can get it working tonight, I'll be able to print you this paper of exactly how I drew it if you want to match all the lettering and line it up, and know how your leader lines would best fit around your drawing. But we won't be doing dimensioning until later, and you actually won't be doing text until later. I'm hoping to just get to the circles and the leader lines tonight for your homework. Sorry, you can hear my baby in the background. So looking at this, you would have your text within your circle, and like I said, it could be a letter or a number. It depends on if you feel it's confusing to have letters here as well as if this was detail A and then you have text up here that is also A. Some people find that confusing, so they switch and either do the opposite for one or the other. So this could be 1, and then your drawing set could be 6. Just depends if you think that's confusing. So I will set all that up, but we're not concerned with text, but just to think about how you could lay it out and why we're using text. To the side, then the whole point of using these is because, as you can see, dimensions start to get very hectic. And it's not just because these leader lines are here, but it's because the smaller the dimensions, the arrows that help us know where our dimensions are falling, they begin to disappear no matter how small you set them, and really they become useless. You lose the spacing around your text, so it'll just be a 2 with a line through it. The more you stack, the harder it is to reference it back to the points and what they are. So to get rid of the dimensions, I accomplish that by adding text in. If I let the cabinetry maker know that I'm using a 2 1/4 inch full round molding here, that's enough detail for them to know what I mean by that, that in fact I'm talking about the depth of the molding, and they would be able to fabricate this piece. They don't need to know it's from here to here because it's only this piece right here. It's a pre-existing molding bit that they would use. So I could get rid of that note and I wouldn't have to have a bunch of text to the side. Now, looking back at some of these photos, some people do details like this, and they do both text and a letter. I like to do individual letters and have all my text to the side. I think that it's a cleaner look. It's a lot less to look at and you can reference back and forth. Let's see if I have any other examples. Some people do all of their text on here and no letters over their dimensions. So here's where I say it starts to get tricky. So in my opinion, the less text in here, the cleaner the detail drawing, the better it's going to turn out for you. So in work, I always use the letters to the side and then the letters on my detail within a circle and then a leader line. And I try to work my way around the outside so I don't have any lines crossing over themselves. And I try to plan it in a way that I leave one side open for dimensions for each of the most important things. So the overall height, the overall width. But you'll notice from those drawings, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. It is okay to cross over your dimensions. You just don't want to cross in the middle of text. So if I have to do it, I wouldn't want to come through and grab my text and put it right through 1'3". I would want to make sure that it was off to the side like I had it before and that it's pointing to that material specifically, and even get it away from this other little arrow over here. So just be aware of your drawing and how somebody's trying to read it, and that you're not creating a muddled mess that nobody can figure out what you're trying to communicate. Okay? So once I send you this drawing, mine will have dimensions on it that will help you to understand how you would actually recreate this drawing and check your accuracy of your import. So when we come through, if I go back to my model, dimension, make sure my snap. So there's my 1 1/4, and then I would actually have another dimension, so 3/4. So I will have given you this information to the side by calling out the thicknesses of the individual boards, and it'll be more detailed. these 2017 dimensions try to complete your thought. It's like Google when you're trying to start typing something and then it just clicks to the next point. Or, well, that's what happens in CAD, but it just starts typing for you. So if I come through, that's 3/4 inch. So when I say it's 3/4 inch thick hardwood, that gives you the dimension of this for you to check. Okay. And then actually the 2 1/4 bit is truly is the width of this, I believe. Put my dimension back in here from this point to, yep, to that point off to the edge. So that tells you the width of this is 2 1/4. The depth of this is 1 1/4. And I might just make a video for you guys walking through each of these individual pieces, but I just wanted to touch on it tonight because there's no way I could make it through all of that in just the class on top of what I want to show you with the walkthrough. We need to cover all of it in order to get to the final. Now, I don't want to scare any of you with the amount of work that this looks like for this week. Although it doesn't look like a lot on paper, I know if you start reading through it, the 3 details and then all of these views, and then there's also going to be some updating to your SketchUp drawing. Really, even though it seems like there's quite a bit of work here, we are getting to a point, if you look at the rubric, the last updated rubric, or if I go into AutoCAD session 1 on mine and pull up this one. I want to let you know, for some of you who are panicking or are getting behind or struggling with SketchUp, how am I going to finish my final? What if I can't get my questions answered? We have 14 and 15 that we're going to be working on our final project. And what that means is those will be almost like lab sessions, where if you have any outstanding questions, we're going to individually answer them on the screen. We're going to walk through anything that doesn't make sense to you. We're going to have work days, in-class work days. I'm sure you've had it in other people's classes as you approach the final, where we're tying up our loose ends and we're putting everything together. So if for some reason you get dinged down or you just are still struggling, these aren't going to be added work on top of all the work that you're getting in these last couple of weeks. They're going to be work days to follow up and finish anything you have questions on. So I hope that that is good news to some of you who are struggling, that this will pretty much be the end of all the work and the learning, and these should be in-class work days. Unless for any reason we have little odds and ends that fall into this to supplement if you don't have questions or we just can't get to everything. So like I'm giving you, for instance, the details this week but not the dimensioning. We might throw that into a later week and just continue with what we need to for those. So going back to here, like I said, I'm going to try and get you an updated drawing by tomorrow, or video explaining every individual piece of this and how this has come together, but I want you to see it here. And then the other drawing detail that we're going to be talking about is cabinetry. So I have started to talk about, and there's just so much to cover, and usually I have a note sheet to the side, but for now it's running in the background because I don't have a printer here. So I said this is only as good as what your model is with your section. So the side view, I can pretty much get all the detail I need from the shadows in this drawing, and because I made up seeing this, okay, how could I construct something similar to this? I knew that this is a router bit, in fact, that they have this half round molding. So I intuited that there was cove going here. And I thought the best way to attach everything was if I had a nailer board. I have a full board here and a full one on the bottom. So I created it from that. I had to use some design knowledge and just basic woodworking knowledge, and maybe even research on the internet, because that goes along with the job of how I could create this with existing wood pieces for someone else to build. But if I was to actually try and do a section of it, I'm pretty sure that, and I have never done a section of this via SketchUp. We're going to learn about sections briefly tonight. So if I want to come up through and I do Tools, Section Plane, and I'm going to see if it's going to work with trying to get this because there's so many different views. Okay, just had it. And I'm going to say Shift to hold that view and kind of pull it down. Okay, so here I use the Section Plane tool and I cut through and I realized that not only does it not know how that was put together, in reality, they didn't have it as a mantle at first. It was just as I had it in your original SketchUp model, a plain brick fireplace. And it was just part of the brick detailing. So I decided I wanted you to do a mantle that matched some of the brick detailing and use that as a detail drawing. But I didn't have any of the guts to tell me what I decided to create in CAD. And that's what CAD is really good for. It's good for taking the design concepts of SketchUp and really putting in the detail knowledge of design and drawing it precisely in less lines more accurately. Okay, so I could take that shell and bring it in and finish it and detail it out. But in some cases, it does supply us with more knowledge, and as I said, it just depends on the model. So if we wanted to take a look, for instance, at our cabinetry, I'm pulling the chat up so I can see it. All right, so if we want to take a look at our cabinetry. So now I got into this section and we'll cover how I did the section at all in the first place. Notice it creates a lovely elevation. I've got weird stuff hanging out in this model because it's a teaching model. I think these are pillows way up here on the ceiling. But how did I do that section we'll come back to. If I want to get out of the section, I can turn off View Section Planes, I believe. Oh, and double click out of it, hopefully. I've been struggling with this all day. And I don't think I'm requiring it of you for your lesson, so I might add it to next week. But let me at least show you again how I did a section. So, oh, we might have just doubled our section views that I needed to show you. So right now I'm stuck in a section view. I thought it had been as easy once to do view and turn off section cuts and turn off section views, and then I was looking at my drawing. Let me make sure that now, I think I fixed it. Okay, yes, that's what I was missing, section cuts. So let me review this before I move on to something new. What I did to get a section cut, and basically it is doing what I'm doing in AutoCAD, where I'm trying to see the interior guts and know how something is being built. So I came up to the tools, sorry, section plane, and notice it's snapping. I'm just dragging to show you all the different things. It tries to find where it wants to land, but it's not very precise and it has trouble. So once you get it as you want it, because you're going to get annoyed with this, it's kind of flippy. If you get it how you want it, say I want to look through, once it's on here, you have to imagine, now I'm going to hold shift. Shift locks in the view that you're trying to get. So if I wanted to look down into it, I would cut that way. Okay, I'm going to undo that section. If I wanted to I'm going to undo that one as well. If I came back to Tools and Section Plane and I want to look through it sideways, I could hold this, and even though it doesn't seem I'm on my fireplace, what's happening is it's cutting the whole building sideways from this point. So it doesn't, you're thinking, oh, I want to get through it, I want to push it over until it's behind the mantle so I can cut behind it. Just think of it as if I cut here, it cuts through the chair. Okay, so you're lined up if you're lined up on the outside of the object where you want it along the side. Think of it that way. Don't think of it as I have to physically get back there with this weird piece of paper that I'm trying to cut through. Okay, edit, undo. If we go again and we grab our section plane, and we've done cut down, we've done cut through this way. This is what I was trying to do, is see the side view. So this is where I started. I pushed shift and I started moving backwards, and I could do it as close or as far from the edge. Woo! That was really strange. It cut everything in half, but also hid it. So I'm going to edit and undo that section. Okay, so I went too far. So maybe if I turned it a little bit more on the angle, and this could happen to you. If it can happen to me, it can happen to you. So if I come through into the section plane, so I can see it better and know that I'm closer, there we go, and didn't go way back behind it. Now I'm cut through there on the side, and really it's on the side of everything. So the side of the table, the side of the bench. Anything that fell in that plane is being cut. All right, so cutting things should be fairly simple using that section plane cutting tool. Then if you don't want to see it like that anymore, you would come into your view and you would turn off section cuts, and then you would turn off section planes, and now you don't have to look at it anymore and be bothered by it. Now, that was empty shell. No one took the time to build it how they were supposed to. It's just a box that's meant to act as kind of a picture. But some items actually are built, as I showed you in that short video that I added to extra videos last week, where he built everything from the drawer grooves to the drawers themselves, the mortise and tenon corners. Every piece he had built the entire cabinet. Some cabinets are awesome. Some cabinets were just blank shells on the outside. Nobody thought about the interior. But let's take a look at our cabinets that I have loaded in. Now for 115 students, this is how it is. For people who are in 108, yours are going to be a little different, but you can check yours tonight when you're working on it. So if I come through again and I do section plane, and I want to be on the face, shift to hold it through, and I pull it back. Oh, I've got to go further, so I'm going to edit and undo that. Tools, section plane, shift because it's on the side, and maybe I'll come back this far. Alright, so they took a little bit of time in creating this section. They actually put shelves inside of my cabinets, but it doesn't seem like there's a ton of detail compared to what maybe I would need. Oh, looks like they added actual lighting and a place for lighting on the underside of these cabinets. So you never know what you're going to get until you do the section, unless it's an interactive object that you can see already, that it's a dynamic component and you can open the doors and close the doors. But in doing your section, you might have enough information to create a detail. I'll tell you the struggle is real, and I've gone through this model, and when I created this model, I was just simply trying to get a nice space layout for these three areas so my students in a 115 only would have a good drawing that they could use in their portfolio and a good reference point for finishing their space planning. I wasn't trying to get these to be perfectly accurate because we're not building our kitchen. But for 108 students, you would have to check and see if you wanted to draw or export this section and use it. It might be better as a reference than as your actual true section. So what I mean by that is my cabinets, and I'm going to edit, undo section, come into my view, turn off section planes, turn off section cuts again. Using my measuring tool, if I was going to try and use this guy for a cabinetry detail as shown in my AutoCAD currently, I did this for your homework. And I know that I'm supposed to have a cabinet that's about 12 to 13 inches deep. I want to have a upper cabinet. I want to have 18 inches of space in here, 20 if I want to have a small appliance. I want to have 24 inches deep for my base cabinet, 4 inches for my toe kick. Now I know that I drew my floor plan in CAD and it's accurate, but what I did as a teacher for my class, because I wasn't going to have them do each of those rooms, was simply threw in a model that somebody else created and was going to create my details more specifically to my plan later. So I kind of scaled this kitchen into fit, made sure it was nominally close to what the widths of a cabinet should be. So if it's 31, my intention was that in the drawing it would actually be 30. So I knew it could fit and all the spacing would work out to be almost close enough to be realistic. Using this measurement tool, if I measure this way, I cannot see it. There we go. 2'6". So there's where I'm saying it's about 30, right? So I'm an inch and a quarter over. And then the space underneath my cabinet, for instance, if I come in through here and around, and actually, in order to do this, I want to turn off my parallel projection and come back in because it'll be a lot easier. Parallel projection can kind of get you stuck places. Seems like I'm stuck right now. I'll turn my walls back on so I have some place to snap to, but really I'm trying to get to there. Okay, so let's see. Do I have 18 inches-ish? 1 foot 5 inches, so about 17 3/4. Okay, very close. Now, my intention behind this drawing for me and my 115 students is for perspectives to be as close as they would be if it was super accurate, but not accurate, not precision. It was more meant to be good enough for the drawing to represent my views. But for people who are in 108, if you're drawing your cabinetry and used it to pull up and then scaled a model to the cabinets that you had actually placed in your AutoCAD drawing, they should be fairly precise. They should be a lot more precise than mine. And if they aren't precise, that's where they should be precise in your AutoCAD drawing. So this is more just a reference to you and a reference to my 115 students of how that could go together and the basics of a section drawing. So looking back at what we're going to use it for, I could export this if knowing the height to that I'm trying to get to 2'6". I'd want to check that and see if that's an accurate height. And then I'd want to make sure this is about 34.5 inches. I want to make sure that this is about 1.5 or 1 3/4 inches. It just depends. That can kind of vary. My toe kick is accurate. Let's see what that's at. Now I did 4.5. So when I scaled everything in, it was just falling beyond this window. So what I did was I picked a cabinet and I said, okay, I know the cabinets come in these X widths. I had them at 36 and some change because their model wasn't 100% precise, and I knew I could go down to 30 inches. So I changed the 36 inch scaled it over until it was 30, and it scaled everything else to be a matching distance. And each of the cabinets ended up to be close enough to be a true cabinet in my drawing. So for me, I'm going to have to either export this as a reference, and it works just the same way. Some of you might be wondering how I could export it. Okay, we just did the mantle. It's a little bit different. Let's see what happens if I try to export a section drawing. And usually I would take this out into a new drawing if I really want it to be clean. The less there is in the background, the cleaner your drawing will be. So tools, but wait, I have to set some things up first. So if the other side of my drawing or my mantle is opposite this, I want to come into standard views and do back, I believe. Zoom extents. Yep. Okay, so here's where I'm sure how you guys got off. Things like this would happen. You'd choose back, you'd get stuck back there, and then you would start orbiting to try and get around it. So now I chose back, and now I'm going to use parallel projection and zoom in again. And you can't tell that it's outlined, but there it is. And in this case, I wonder, I've never tried to do it this way. Tools, section plane, shift, and kind of, okay, so I'm going to have to orbit. I just told you not to, but I have to make sure I have this cut first. Okay, so I want to have it cut through. That was too far. I'm seeing through to the other one, and it is all about playing with your drawings like this. So come back up to tools, go back down to section plane, shift, hold the shift button, come back a little bit, but not so far that you're, and then undo. So if it's giving you trouble, you can come all the way out of parallel projection and try it so that you can see your section plane. Shift, just there, okay. Get it lined up. Back. All right. So it kind of throws me around my drawing. Then camera, parallel projection. Now I'm zooming, scrolling in, but I'm not orbiting. Now it doesn't look, it looks like I'm looking at an end panel to the next cabinet, but this is really just the parallel projection of the cabinet section. So now I'm going to say File, Export, 2D Graphic. Ooh, I've never done that one either, but 2D Graphic. We'll do it both ways and see what happens. AutoCAD file, and I will call this, oh look, I've done this before. I'll call it upper cabinet 0.040716. Export. Then I'll hit OK. I could either go to that file and open it if I'm you, or if I want to come into the program and say File, Open, Session 11, my export and the date, continue opening, and there it is. So at the very least, this shows me, now my assumption is that they drew it correctly or they knew how they were putting a cabinet together. It shows me that this might be a good idea. I could do butt joints where I'm coming through and I have my door as a full overlay door. So this is the door and it's full overlay, but then these are drilling into the side or backboard back here. These are shelves. I don't know if they're floating or rigid because there's no dots to indicate that it's adjustable in any way for the pinholes. But some of you have even a hard time conceptualizing the boards going together to create the outer shell. So if you want it ever as a reference, you can, but notice again we have the issue with a bunch of geometry. I zoom in closer and I see there's extra lines, and then I'm just doing the math to find out, well, which one's my correct line. And sections seem to be worse than if I'm just doing an outside view or an elevation. Those tend to be fairly accurate, but sections, you have to start deleting the extra lines. It's usually the outermost or innermost lines you can tell, the ones that would basically, if you filleted, they'd come together. Okay, so is this super helpful? No, not necessarily. But it does give you a tool, because in some cases, if you brought in a 30-inch cabinet, snapped it into your 30-inch space on your plan that you brought in from AutoCAD that had that 30-inch space perfectly precise from AutoCAD, and you snapped your cabinet edges to be that, then yes, this could be exported accurately. So it really depends on your model, and it depends on how you're using it. If you brought in a craft-made cabinet, a lot of their stuff you can indeed cut through and see exactly how it's made. So this is just missing information. One, because it's a free hanging cabinet, so it's not on a wall, so it's a little different than mine. But two, because I scaled it. I wasn't looking to match anything that I had in my AutoCAD drawing, had brought in specifically, no walls or any placement. So for your homework, for your cabinetry drawing, I'm going to, one second, talk you through the sizing of this cabinet and all the board sizes and how to do your arrows like I did for this, and talk about how to build it. So I want you to be thinking about what you're drawing with this cabinetry view. Again, another cross section, but I think those are the most important details for you to learn as a student, because everyone can understand a side view. You can see a side view. It's understanding how pieces are coming together to build what you're making and what you're trying to communicate to the builders. So for me, I would have to call out if these cabinets are to be finished with melamine, so that white nasty stuff, or it could be black, really it could be any color that you want, or if I want to have it be solid hardwood or a veneer panel on the inside. Here I'm showing my 2x6s that are continual, that will be behind. In our case, these walls are plaster walls, and then we'll have our nailer boards that you can connect in. Notice that cabinets aren't usually flush to the wall. They really have an inset back panel, and then they have some 2x4s that you're going to use to connect something. And then we would show our adjustability. Sometimes there's a ton of holes. In my case, I thought maybe if I just did 6-inch adjustability, I don't have to have a bunch of holes, because at what point am I going to have something that's way up here or way down here? So I picked the places I wanted the adjustability, and that's the only place I have them. It could be different. You could have a billion little holes for adjustability all the way through your cabinet. And here's again a good example of showing that section text that's detailing out what we're doing. Minimal dimensions for these. It's usually more about the materials you're using. You'll call out your pull. You'll call out the heights of your upper cabinets. You'll call out the backsplash if you have a backsplash. Maybe your countertop edge detail. Another whole detail could be this edge. Some people do that as a detail in your drawings. I know as a student, those are the favorite ones. Oh, I have a detailed drawing. I'm going to do an inch baseboard, and I'm going to do a rounded countertop. So those are also counted as detailed drawings, but really these are the ones that teachers are looking for. Call out your glides, the way your cabinets are closing. Call out your toe kick. Sometimes it's the continued material from the floor. Sometimes it's a rubber. It could be the wood or a matching piece of laminate. So those will all be details that I'll be looking for eventually in the text that's calling out to the sides. For now, this week, I'm just going to have you do the leader lines, and in my case, a circle, and then that will be it. We'll leave the blank spaces for the lettering, and then what the actual materials you're calling out will be. but let's see if I can get a better detail of a cabinet. I know I had a couple. So here's where they're saying the base and the floor finish, and they're showing the blocks. I did find a good website because this still can be hard for people to understand seeing it cut through like this. I found a website today that I can show you really quick, and I'll be posting, to your extra video slash information. Let me Control C this and copy it into my browser really quick. Yes. Okay. How to install a kitchen. So I think this beautifully shows things in the cabinets that you wouldn't get to see otherwise. So here he is squaring up his cabinets on the wall by first using this ledger board so that he makes sure everything is square completely around the room, and then he's going to hang them. But when we're talking about the blocking on the floor, there's some good views of that, how it's connecting into the subfloor. So you have a flooring block, which is usually what we show. Sometimes it could be multiple pieces like this, or it might be a 2x2 square, it could be a 2x6, a 2x4, so we just call that out. And then you're going to overlay this so the cabinets don't move once they're placed. I think there's another image that does show possibly the back of an upper cabinet. Here they're just showing how it's attaching to the side, but still I thought these were each individually helpful to see the process of it, how they're clamping the sides. Sometimes we have framed cabinets where we have the bars going across the front, or sometimes we have frameless where it's completely open and we have the shelves sitting with open space around them. So just good to see what you're drawing when you're drawing that little square at the bottom of your AutoCAD drawing, which I'm showing right in here. So here's where my cabinet is sliding over those blocks. And then here's my handles. I did match my Sketchup. So here's where you have to say, if I am doing it in here and I'm drawing my detail from here, I want it to match whatever I'm showing in SketchUp. This is where the 115 students, you're going to have less information than my 108 students. You're going to have less information than the 115. You might have chosen your poles. I want you to draw the pole that you're using as closely as you can in AutoCAD. The size of the text will be the same. Maybe the thickness of the boards, that's all up to you. You know, what you've drawn for your cabinets. Now, don't get too caught up on, well, I don't know how it's being built. I don't know what it is. You know, if you do have a good model, you could start from there and modify mine. And not that you're making it up, but say, okay, yes, it's pretty much the same. I plan to have maybe not a shelf, but a drawer. Then you would research how to add in a drawer. It's fairly simple to find a bunch of sections and how it goes together, because basically that's what section drawings of cabinetry are. You could modify a KitchenAid cabinet that's existing and say, okay, so they use 1/2 inch boards for the tops and bottoms, they used 3/4 inch for the outside. I'm going to do that, but I'm going to make my shelf less thick, or however you want to build your cabinet, that's how you're building your cabinet. I do just want you to incorporate the pull to match your drawing. So in my case, I had these very contemporary pulls. If you're in my 115 class for the AutoCAD class and you want to change the polls or have changed the polls, then all you would do is come through and draw that in well, basically elevation, because you're not going to cut through your pole. So you'll just turn it to the side and show how far it comes off and the shape of it, if it's a ball or if it was a circle instead of a handle. You know, you would just draw a basic knob and then you would move it. And too small, you could stretch it until it fits, have it from the side, or a smaller rectangle if it was flat from the front. and round. You could just have a smaller rectangle on the side showing a knob. Whatever you're using, just make sure that it's reflected in your drawing. If you don't want them to be adjustable, and I have a call out for this to be adjustable and a bunch of dots, then say that it says set shelf in your pull-out in your notes to the side. I want this to be a reflection of what you plan on building, but I also think that the detail, even though it doesn't seem like a lot of detail tonight, is more the direction than I've gotten in the program. Sometimes they want you to just look in past books, and I looked through my past books that I used as a student. Obviously, we'll all end up having the same wall material in here. It's going to be plaster, not drywall, so that call out should be the same. You're going to have the same type of nailer boards and blocking that's going to connect your cabinets. It'll more be the accessories and the planning of the cabinets. I'd assume all of us have some type of doored cabinet space and doored tops. If you don't, if you have drawers, then you would just want to Google base cabinet with drawers and modify this drawing. Think about the size in your model. If you have a model that you like and this is a 6-inch drawer, you could do a section, see how they're cutting through the front, then maybe come in, find a drawer base. And if I don't have it here, I know I have it in another one. I could probably even Google it myself right now. But it just shows the individual sides and exactly how you would build them. And then you would make sure that you note each of those in the notes to the side. I just want as much detail as you can give me and showing construction that says, yes, it does in fact attach to a wall. So there's a little bit of looseness to this. There's going to be more rigidity in the dimensioning and the size of the text. That's why I'm starting with this. And then we'll get to the details that are harder like that to do later. But for this week, you're more copying a drawing, and if not copying this drawing, then copying the drawing for the most part, changing the handles, adding drawers, whatever you need to do. And then if it is different and it's something you feel needs to be called out, you're adding a leader line. Does that make sense? It'll make more sense when I make a better rubric for you tonight, judging on what we get together after this class. But if that makes sense as far as the amount of detail that you have and how you would end up laying it out finally with having notes to the side and leader lines. So going back, it'll eventually end up looking like a detailed drawing with text. And then for now, because we don't know our drawing sets, or we'll end up eventually saying mantle cross section, then saying 1 1/2 inch equals 1 foot 0 inches underneath. Then I could possibly say sheet 1 drawing 6. Okay, so that's where we're headed, but for now it's going to look more like this. And imagine all of this gone, all of these texts gone, all the dimensions gone, just leader lines and this drawing after I give you the dimensions and send them to you. And then the side view, it would just look just like this. And I don't need this view. This was just me bringing it in to show you how Sketchup brings things in lines. So really you'll have those two for your mantle. You'll have one of the cabinetry, and I'll be giving you all the dimensions, the heights, and the spacing. So it'll just be drawing. We'll be practicing drawing lines again. Then you'll be changing out your pulls, adding drawers, or if you want shelves, and leader lines. And then this one, I just want to talk to you about an error on my side. And I wouldn't have even known it, and you wouldn't have even known it probably better unless you went to change your stair. I know some of you were kind of working on handicap accessibility options, so some were looking at, I've seen drawings that had elevators in them, I've seen them with ramps. People have kind of modified those stairs themselves, but when